Hey, folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with another On the Salt with Captain David Blinken. David, how are you?
I'm great, Marvin. How are you doing today?
As always, I'm just trying to stay out of trouble, and I know you're temporarily back in New Jersey, but you've been on the water quite a bit recently.
Yeah, I mean, 4 days on, but boy, we had a rough 2 weeks with northeast wind. It just has been relentless, and it's kept a majority of us off the water, unless we got a chance to sneak in some quiet backwaters that's protected. Otherwise, it's been kind of a brutal September. I'm glad we're in October now.
Yeah, and were those kind of like, advanced winds of some of the hurricane activity we've had down here in the Southeast?
Really what it is, it wasn't that actually. We had a little bit of cloudiness and drizzliness from the hurricanes, but what it really is we had a stagnant frontal system and nothing coming out of the west to push it away. So just these little lows were coming up the coast, and when they do that, they throw northeast wind back at us. And unfortunately, the northeast winds were rather strong. In fact, too strong to go fishing in.
Well, that's a bummer, but you've managed to get out. Have you found the false albacore?
Well, I know we have false albacore in central Long Island Sound, which is a little out of my range. And again, we have them 8 to 10 miles offshore, and they're up in New England. They're everywhere but Montauk and eastern Long Island, surprisingly. But hopefully that'll change and they'll show up. But we've got some stripers around and some bluefish, and we had a nice little feed last week where we had striped bass and bluefin tuna mixed together, and that was kind of fun to watch.
Oh, well, neat. I've got an interesting question for you as we kind of, Brenner's eager. He wants to get to wintertime, right? I'm just happy to get to fall and have the humidity drop out and maybe get out and get on the water. But, he was curious, if you, say traditionally are fishing a floating line, in the wintertime, kind of like you would for trout, do you need to think about fishing deeper in the water column because the fish are going to basically go deeper and the floater's not going to get to them?
Well, first of all, it depends on where you're fishing, when you're fishing, the species you're fishing for. So why don't I just use striped bass as an example? Very often they're migratory, but some striped bass do stick around. And of course, on those warmer winter days, they're going to be more active than they are on the colder winter days. And on those warmer winter days, they may travel closer to the edges where you don't have to fish quite as deep. But if you do want to fish them and the water is cold, you probably have to start thinking about sinking lines, identifying the fish with sonar. And if you're walking a waterway and you're walking the deep water edge, you just have to kind of blind cast and slowly retrieve, with the sinking line. But if you're lucky enough to be walking an edge in the winter where the water is warmed up a bit, those fish might come up along the edges. And in that case, you actually, if it's water that's under 3 feet deep, you can actually use a floating line. So you have to think situationally. Now, if, for example, you're fishing, let's go tropical. In the winter, you might be fishing for bonefish. It could be a cold day in January. The bonefish may leave the flats for deeper water, but then they're hard to locate. But when they do come back up on the flats, they're generally going to be in shallow water. So, those kind of winter conditions, give you certainly an advantage using floating line. It's different. Like, my freshwater friends who fish trout in the winter, very often, trout gather in big ponds in the winter, and you've got to locate where those ponds are, and then you fish to them, nymphing, either, not very often dry fly, but, you're fishing a nymph close to the bottom and just bumping it along. But in salt water, we don't get that advantage. The fish are always on the move. They don't gather in one or two particular places. They're moving around, and many times they're trying to follow what bait there may be available to them. So, I hope that's a help.
Yeah. And so just to kind of help educate me on the saltwater side. So, like say trout in the wintertime, they're generally going to be in deep, slow water, maybe like that are spring fed. But like if you have stripers that are, overwintering where you are, they basically trying to find, kind of slow, deep spots that are not super affected by the tide?
They may be finding those slow, deep spots. Very often what they do is they'll swim up a creek into an impoundment where the water virtually isn't moving at all. It may go up and down slightly with the tide, but they can be in very still water. And it's those warmer days in the winter where you can take advantage of those fish and they'll move around a bit. Those warm, overcast or maybe partly sunny days. On the really, really cold days, they're going to be almost in a hibernation type state where they're going to be very, very sluggish and barely moving. And in order to get them to eat a fly, you literally have to pull it right by their nose. So it takes a lot of effort in that case.
Yeah. And so, what's the forage generally in terms? Is it, eels, crabs, bait fish? What is the kind of normal winter forage for stripers that overwinter?
It certainly can be little crabs. It could be certain types of bait fish winter over. It could be, it could be small herring. It could be spearing, fish like that. There are some species of shrimp that are around all winter long and other things that, we don't even know exist. But the cool thing about fish, stripers and all fish is they take advantage of what's in front of them. They're opportunistic feeders. So in the winter, when there's less food, we can kind of go for that opportunistic feeding attitude that fish, naturally carry with them. So, just getting something by them, maybe pulling a clouser minnow across the bottom very slowly, or a deceiver type fly. It doesn't necessarily have to be big, but it needs to certainly attract their attention. So maybe, olive over white or chartreuse over white might work really well, both in a clouser or a deceiver type pattern. But I would definitely, for stripers, I'd try to fish as low in the water column as I could. It doesn't mean they won't come up. And even low in the water column when it's 3 feet of water, get it closer to the bottom. But take advantage of warm days in winter, just like we do, just like you might do trout fishing. Those days are going to certainly give you better opportunities than the coldest days where, frankly, I don't even want to be out there. If my guides are freezing up, I feel like I should be skiing.
Yeah, fair enough. And, folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email me or DM me on social media. As I always say, let's make David's life a little bit easier. And if we use your question, I will send you some articulate fly swag. And we're in a drawing for a Royal Wolf line of your choice. And, David, before I let you go, I think the last time we spoke, you were trying to fill 1 or 2 spots on maybe a November trip down to Mexico. And you want to let folks know how to get on the boat and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah. November 9 through 14, fishing the 10th through the 13th, I have a tarpon trip going to Campeche to fish juvenile tarpon and some baby tarpon. So these fish range in size from 5 to that time of year, 30, 40 pounds. And, it's a wonderful trip. I'm hosting it. Would love to have anybody who wants to come along and join a very chill group of people to have some wonderful tarpon fishing and some of the best Mexican food you can imagine in Campeche.
Got it. And I guess your guide season, you're getting ready to probably start waxing the skis here not too long in the future, right?
Well, I have about 5 weeks to go, and then I head to Mexico. Then I'll be working with the ski school, and then I have another trip going to Mexico in December. And then after that trip, it's going to be all skiing all the time until April.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, folks, as I always say, you owe it to yourself to get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, David.
Tight lines, Marvin.